As the grandson of a migrant, I have no difficulty saying that migrants can very often make a very valuable contribution to the country that receives them. That is very straightforward. I want to concentrate my opening remarks on the question of asylum seekers and the current crisis, which involves not hundreds or even tens of thousands, but millions of people who are entitled to think of themselves as refugees seeking asylum. Some of the facts are not controversial. It is not controversial that people have a right under international law to seek asylum if they are being persecuted. Secondly, it's not in dispute there are several million people, mostly Syrians, but not just Syrians, who can claim that entitlement at the present time. And I think thirdly also, I have no problem with the proposition that the United Kingdom and Europe must accept a share of the obligation to meet that requirement. But let me move into slightly more controversial territory. The first point I would make is that the vast majority of the Syrian asylum seekers are no longer in Syria. There are many who are in Syria, but I'm talking about the 2 or 3 million, perhaps even more than that, who are mainly in Turkey or Jordan or Lebanon. And at this moment in time, they are no longer suffering persecution that has made them asylum seekers. They have asylum, although not in very agreeable or attractive circumstances, and with no certainty as to their long-term future. But they are not currently at risk to their lives because of the government and the country from which they have left. Second point, people have rights of seeking asylum. They neither have nor have ever had a right to say, and I want to go to this particular country, and it's unreasonable and unacceptable for that country not to accept me. There is no such legal entitlement. That is a matter for both the receiving country and the asylum seeker to reach agreement on. And thirdly, there is no specific British or European obligation that doesn't apply to the rest of the world. The treaty obligations we all operate under are universal obligations, and therefore if there are millions of people seeking asylum, this is not, as it's so often described, a challenge to Europe. It is an ethical and legal obligation for all the civilized countries of the world to share in responding to this burden. And the final point I would make in these opening comments is, in addition to that, there is a very real question as to whether the best way when you're dealing with millions of people who are living very close to their original country, many of whom will want to return to that country, most of whom are actually, of these refugees, are exactly the sort of people their own country needs even more than the rest of the world because of their professional skills and their other educated qualities. We have to also look at ways of allowing them to remain as close as possible to Syria, which will require billions of pounds or dollars of help from the international community, but and also a change in the rules that at the moment prevents them even being able to work when you're living as a refugee and an asylum seeker. That is absurd and obviously causes maximum discontent. So there are a remedy of solutions, but I conclude by saying it is not either ethically or legally correct to imply that there is a uniquely British obligation or European obligation. All the past problems, such as at the end of the Second World War, led to millions of people going not just to Europe, elsewhere in Europe, but to the United States, to South America, to Australia, and in the case of Arab refugees, the Arab states themselves, many of whom are incredibly wealthy, should be accepting their share of the obligation also.